take me back to that time. Obviously, I wasn't alive then. A lot of people weren't, but or have read about it or seen movies about it or documentaries. Why was that so important? Why was Kent State so important?
Because you weren't alive then. Thanks for underscoring.
Exactly. Yes.
We were so pleased that you could come out to the elder home for the interview.
But this was
just worried about the virus. Okay.
But obviously, the Vietnam War had been raging. It was a huge deal, and there was a lot of controversy here. People were opposed to the war, but Kent State was like you described it as like the gunshot or the trigger, right?
It was the trigger for us. It was, the anti-war movement had been going on for several years, ever since there was an involvement, over there. So it was not a new thing, okay? What was new was the killing of American students by American armed forces, okay? And, the Pulitzer Prize photograph that year was the anguished screams of this young lady bent over the body of one of her student colleagues who had been shot by the National Guard. So we thought we had been, by we I mean there were a whole bunch of people that had been involved in the anti-war protest here in Phoenix, and we met at in student housing over at ASU. In a place called Sin City, okay, and it just felt like we wanted something physical, okay. Instead of there'd been lots of protests and lots of yelling and screaming in the streets, and we wanted something that wrote about this. And there was a memorial demonstration for the shootings at Kent State that was called to be held at Goodwin Stadium. And
this is at Arizona State University.
This is in Tempe at ASU. Mm-hmm. And the morning newspaper under Eugene Pulliam called for the hard hats to come out to that demonstration to show the students what America was really all about. And this was not sui generis. Hard hats have been fighting with protesters for some time. In fact, the construction workers in New York City had assaulted anti-war protesters prior to all of this. And so I went out to Goodwin Stadium and was interviewing a construction worker up in the stands who had, at the direction of the daily newspaper, had showed up to protest the protesters. Mm-hmm. And he said, "Excuse me for just a second." And he walked down the stairs in the stadium to the ground, to the playing field, and sucker punched the head of the Tempe Peace Center, a guy named Joe Gerson, knocked out his front teeth and dropped him like a sack of potatoes, unconscious, onto the ground. The hard hat then walked back up the stairs, sat back down with me, and finished his interview. And that was our first cover story in the then Arizona Times.
And what was you asked him why he did that, right? What was the reason for him?
Gerson had a patch of an American flag upside down, stitched onto the butt of his jeans, international sign of distress. And the gentleman I was interviewing took that as a personal affront to America and to American troops and to the American government, and he wasn't having it.
Mm-hmm. And the why do you think there was? Or explain it, because a lot of people are not going to understand why was there this animosity between the hard hats, the construction workers, and the students who were protesting the war?
Well, this is a generational thing. And it wasn't just here in America. I mean, Jim was in Mexico City and saw students there being shot and killed. Mm-hmm. In America, you had what was primarily a World War II generation, okay, and all of a sudden their children they don't recognize their children anymore. First of all, their children have got long hair. They're wearing, bell-bottom jeans. They've got sandals. A disgraceful element called patchouli oil makes itself felt, okay, at this point. Drugs become commonplace, in our parents' generation, you had occasionally, you occasionally had books, paperbacks about addiction. Okay, what was it? The Man with the Golden Arm or the Golden Horn or something.
Right.
There was a
Man with the Golden Arm.
Okay, which is about a musician who's a drug addict. These were sort of icebergs in the popular culture. Okay, this was not indicative of where the World War II generation was at. In our generation, everybody was stoned, not continuously, okay, but damn close, okay. And so you had this, and you had music like the Rolling Stones, okay, and there was this Korean boy band, the Beatles, that was very popular, okay, and all of this drove my parents up the wall. Okay, they just couldn't believe what was going on, and it wasn't just because my parents were psycho; it was because all parents were psycho.